On the morning of the 12th of July 2021, we as South Africans woke up to what felt like an apocalyptic movie. What had apparently started as protest against the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma had deteriorated to a looting spree in two provinces. The images that we saw on the news, the videos that were trending on social media, and the ominous voice notes doing the rounds on WhatsApp felt like we were on the verge of a kind of collapse as a country, as a people. It was a surreal sight, but it found us already numb from over a year of dealing with a health pandemic that the world hasn't seen in over 100 years. In that same week, I was supposed to record this episode with Gogo Jebhu on the 13th of July. And the night before, I sent her a message to say that she must tell me if she would still be comfortable with coming to record and traveling the streets of Gauteng. She said she would know by morning, and when the morning came, it felt as though the whole country was on fire. So we postponed the recording. I wanted to talk about Umsamo. It is one of those extremely vague yet seemingly integral aspects of African spirituality. I personally hadn't heard of the word until a few years ago, and what I knew was that it had to do with a place of spiritual grounding of some kind, or a kind of revered space in people's homes which functions as a kind of a Wi-Fi router for connecting with your guides. As the mayhem in Gauteng and KZN intensified, and it occurred to me that all that I was witnessing was not a disruption or a hindrance of me recording this episode, but it was in fact a crucial part of the lesson itself. If Umsamo is something that has to do with spiritual grounding, then what I was seeing, what I was hearing, and what I was feeling in my gut, that is what not being spiritually grounded felt like. When we have no sacred spaces in our homes, that is where we drag stolen fridges and coffins and desperately needed groceries to. That's where we put them. Right there where we are supposed to connect with our guides. But then who is there in those spaces to connect with when the poverty that has led us to this point is the very same poverty that we inherited from those whom we are so desperately trying to connect with for a better life? Maybe I was being too overly critical. Maybe I was, as they say, speaking from a position of privilege, and I was not understanding Umsamo or the context of it. What I do know is that the topic of Umsamo is also a very divisive topic because there are many varying interpretations of what it is, especially across the different cultures that our people belong to. So when the dust settled and the fires died down, I rescheduled with Gogo and it finally happened. Gogo Jebhu is a healer, a spiritual teacher, a gobela, a businesswoman, a mother, and she specializes in being an exorcist. This conversation forms part of a series called Practicing African Spirituality for Beginners, and if you haven't listened to the previous installment, please do so because the episodes do follow each other. Other than that, enjoy. And to sort of take it back to the topic that I would like us to discuss now, is that a lot of the time when we talk about spirituality, there's a way in which it reminds us, or it compels us to remember the past, or to try to connect with the past. But what I don't know is how much of an understanding do we have about how people navigated spirituality back in the day? And I know Gogo always says, when you say back in the day, where do you mean? Because back in the day is a very broad spectrum.
It's very broad.
But now I'm trying to understand, like, in your understanding, of the past, how did people, our predecessors, engage with spirituality? What was it for them?
I would say it's a part of them, like it just like you can say mental health, and you can say physical health, and there's a lot of resources and professionals, and it's a serious field of study. And even the physical body, it's a serious growing field of study, and it's advancing. But spirituality got left behind. I don't think they left it behind as much as we do. For you to know that you have a spiritual ailment, I'd say myself, in the beginning, I had to go through very extreme things to say, okay, maybe now I'm spiritually afflicted. But with a body ailment, if I start sneezing, and I know if I sneeze this many times, and if I have a fever, this is then a physical ailment, and I need to see my doctor. If I have low moods and they last a certain amount of time, and I feel like I saw someone saying, I'm in a bad place. And how I instantly thought that is place is your brain, and and the chemical structure is putting you in a certain place. Is physical, but actually it's not always physical. It's where you are in your mind. Like, I'm in a bad place in my mind, so you recognize the mind as a faculty that needs attention, and there's enough awareness and advancements in mental health for people to think of that as a place. But spirituality is like, we're so removed from it. I don't think back in the day they were not infallible. They were infallible, but they had more space in their lives for having the spiritual as, I'm not in a good space. It can mean physical, mental, or spiritual. I don't think they left it like they were so removed from it as we are.
Oh, so like they didn't separate it, in that it was a common thing. Like if you have a headache, you can say that it's stress.
Yes,
and for them, you could say that something was spiritual, in the same vein of saying, this is stress, this is spiritual. Yes,
like you could know, it's okay. I know when I have a headache in a certain space, because I do like struggle with headaches, but they've become like my indicator, my internal indicator to myself. It's okay, if I feel this headache a certain way for this long, it's actually a tension headache. What am I tense about? Like, it's going back to understanding self. And if I feel this headache a certain way and I don't recognize it, like, I'm 32 now, so I know, okay, the body changes, but I know myself. So if I feel this headache a certain way, and I can now search, is it in me or is it foreign? Then okay, I'm feeling someone else's headache. I just need to know how the headache manifests in their body, but now this is now a spiritual thing, like I'm carrying someone else's affliction or ailment. so that I can know how bad can this headache be. But then I know sometimes, like, okay, this headache is, I haven't had water, but you're so far removed that it's taken me, I think, 7 years to get to what type of headache, for example,
So you reckon that you took 7 years to be able to put spirituality on the same plane as psychology, as medical health, as it's not an extraordinary thing. So then our predecessors were also on that level, where for them to go to assign something to being a spiritual ailment wasn't a far off thing. It wasn't like, now that everything has failed, this is what possibly could be.
Well, Dala, and I mean, when I say Dala, I know when it comes to certain ancestors that I've had interactions with, in like as a spiritual person, in my bloodline and in other people's bloodlines, I know I mean quite recent, But Dala, there's a practice as I found Petreni, in which you greet to Gobela Exeni and you tell him your dreams, right? So then he can gauge where you are. If we had those simple practices in our households, you could create awareness. If you have a dream like this in our bloodline, in yoga, that's of this color, this is what it means. If you feel this thing in a certain way, then or in you, but it's a spiritual problem. But it's seldom an individual's problem. In the spiritual ailment, it's a sign from the ancients, which there's an imbalance.
I think another good thing about in how spirituality is sort of constructed in our understanding is that this is why you would have inyanga, in the sense that inyanga, when they give you, the herbalists, they don't always necessarily give you medicine based on spirituality.
Yes.
So there was that distinction that there could be something spiritual, or something is just
something
an
is
ailment.
just
it's just a physical thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something is wrong. You have
like
a headache because you have a headache. Yeah.
Like your uterus is imbalanced, so take this herb. Like this is now a physical thing. It's not that they didn't have that knowledge. This is now a physical thing. But if ukhala kanda in a certain way, then if ugogo, like the community of elders and in your family would say, the last person, that's another thing, record keeping that we've lost. So in the last person to have these types of headaches, like Kaya, maybe, then maybe let's go to Isangoma. It wasn't the first port of call to know the very basic things about yourself, because that was spoken openly in the family.
Sure. So what I've always been curious about with, the older people, our predecessors, is what instruments did they use to, and I'm saying, when I say them, I'm saying ordinary people. I'm not saying necessarily talking about healers, but what instruments did ordinary people use in engaging with spirituality?
I'll say as a woman, I'll answer as a woman or someone who has a uterus. Even just the flow of your period is an instrument. And is it heavy? How is the flow? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is there pain? Is it more pain than usual? Or is there no pain this time? That's an instrument.
Wow.
It's an internal instrument, and I have to teach, when I do have a matwasa, I have to teach a matwasa, Uguti, it's not this foreign thing that's an inconvenience. It's an instrument that is in you, Uguti, if your period is heavy and maybe you found a new job, but suddenly your period is heavy. It's heavier than usual. That involves a lot of work of knowing yourself and engaging with yourself. So engaging with your period, it's okay. Since I started this job, my period has been heavier. The flow, I'm making more money here, but really it's not reflecting in my life. Like suddenly I can't make ends meet. Those are instruments, and a funny instrument, like when you have a twitch, an eye twitch, like if it's the bottom lid of the eye, then uzokhala. If it's the upper lid of the eye, then you're going to see someone. So there are internal instruments that everyone has to indicate what is happening in their lives or answers to your everyday questions.
So there wasn't things like objects that were used in praying because I don't know, I'm not familiar with the use of objects necessarily
it depends where you come from or where your lineage comes from, because I mean, as a Manguni and other people, we don't really originate from South Africa. So like, as we were trekking down and settling and being nomads at some point, there were different things that other people used in those regions. But I know I was surprised to learn last year, Guti, like Amandebele, they don't use Impepo. They don't really know Impepo until they come to Joburg and they find jobs, and then they hear everyone talking about Impepo. They have a plant and it's called a Machechech, and they burn that to speak with Amadlozi. As much as Nati, everyone can burn Impepo. So this is Amanguni. I'm not sure about Abesut, but you can burn Impepo and speak with Amadlozi.
What does that actually say about spirituality, in that realizing that now we're all talking about Impepo, we want to, and we just talking about Impepo, we're not talking about Impepo Yasentabeni, we're not talking about
just Impepo.
We just talk like, is it something that people necessarily have to be wary about? Is it something that a person would need to find out if you in particular should be using Impepo, or is it one of those all general purpose type of?
It's not. Thing? It's definitely not general purpose Impepo. The Anguni people abangayisebenzisa Impepo. Just to say, Umswati, and he never keeps Impepo endumbeni yakhe. He never burns Impepo, and he doesn't use Impepo to communicate with amadlozi wakhe. And he taught us mixing ash, nemili, namanzi. And you spit, but outside the home. You spit in the 4 directions, and you go to the center. So you've built Umsamo for the moment, a momentary Umsamo, to speak with your ancestors. He wouldn't burn Impepo. It's about finding out in your bloodline, what do they use to communicate.
So it's an assumption that something needs to burn.
It's an assumption. Amachecheche, you burn them because it's a plant. It's like dried, the bark like peels off into very thin layers that look like an onion. So you burn that, But utjwala, it's called utjwala besilo, the ash and maize meal and water. That's a different thing. And you use it outside where the energies are neutral. It's not like mhlambe ekhaya kuxatshene, or the energies are maybe they are charged up in a negative or positive way. Where the energies are neutral, you spit in the 4 directions, ungene phakathi ubiza wonke amadlozi wakini ukhulume nawo. And some people just use tobacco, snuff, and snuff, you don't burn it. And usukhulumile namadlozi wakho.
Was this this practice that was assigned to a certain person in the family, or is it, in your understanding, or is it something that you believe that everybody could do?
It's not everybody. It depends what ukuthi ukhuluma ngani. Like if I'm asking about a boyfriend, that has nothing to do with my family, my living family. I can ask on my own, but abanye bazothi, as a woman or as a daughter, awukhulumi emsamo. if kunomsamo kini. Then you ask your own elders, okay, lo muntu ngithola usibani, we've met and we're talking about a relationship. Is he the right person? Ungakuphahlela lokho. Wedwa. Sometimes bazothi uzongena emsamo mina ngomafungo washekhaya. So in the clan, I'm the first daughter to a son. So ngomafungo washe, I'm able ukuthi vele ngikhuluma emsamo because a lot doesn't happen emsamo mangekho. So I'm able to go on behalf of myself, on behalf of my cousins who really are sisters, on behalf of other people, but kunemithetho ebakhona in each bloodline. So depending on your bloodline, ungaziphahlela wedwa, or everyone in that bloodline ungaziphahlela in that family, or only the males, or only the females.
Okay. I wanted to get back to that. We'll come back to that one. But then let us establish, what is Umsamo? Is it because for me, Umsamo, I literally learned that word probably in the last 2 to 3 years. I've heard about it, I've done my own research about it, and it seems to be one of those, an integral part of spirituality, yet is one of the most vaguest ones, because and the reason why I say it's integral in that it's not about twice, it's not about, you know what I mean? This is about literally every single family.
Yes.
So is Umsamo, is it a physical place? Is it a physical structure? Is it a philosophy of understanding something? Like, what is it?
Umsamo, it's not just a physical place. It's also a metaphysical place. Ekhayeni we nizothi masikhuluma namadlozi, you tell amadlozi ukuthi masikhuluma nani sinibeka la. But also yourself as an individual, Umsamo. Because that's where amadlozi, you don't, if it's a rendezvous with a flooring of cow dung and thatch roof, you don't lift that and take it to Isangoma. You go as yourself. And Isangoma picks up inkinga zasemsamo wagini that may have nothing to do with you, but tells you umsamo wagini umeganje, and this is probably one of the reasons that these things are happening. But Umsamo is not something that's you have to assign it a certain way. That's why banye abantu uzothi lungisana umsamo kini athi bathi bakholwa they're Christians and akunamsamo and I don't know where to begin. The conflicts that come with that. But ukulungisa umuntu qala as the first umsamo qala is you, your body that you're living in, and your spirit and your mind. That's umsamo woqala. Your mother's uterus was umsamo wako woqala. So all of those places are places that, in my understanding and in my experience, are umsamo. It's not just a physical place in Ibegela Madlozi. And it doesn't mean that life doesn't continue. It doesn't mean that you can't start anywhere. You can start with yourself as Umsamo. Because amadlozi akhalayo aphakama kubani kuwe, as the human being. When I first started ukulungisa umsamo wasekhaya, they would say very weird things like, your eyes start feeling like there's a mist awusaboni kahle for a few moments. That's a sign from amadlozi wagini, and they're saying lungisa umsamo, or your back iba buhlungu lungisa umsamo. And this is after ngithwasile. So I'm glad this happened after ngingathwasa, because then I could say, oh, okay, then it doesn't mean that angithwasanga kahle cha. It's a bloodline issue now. It's not just an individual issue.
I don't know why is it every time I hear the word Umsamo, I think of a shrine.
It is a shrine. It is a shrine, but it's also an altar. So, if your mom usonta ukonza Weseli Methodist Church and gune altar, they make sure it's clean.
Yes.
They make sure certain people labami, lapayana, all those rules are rules of Umsamo. So your mother does do something for Umsamo. But it may not be Umsamo enubege gini. The reverence and the respect and the rules that altar, whether it's Catholic, whether it's Methodist, or a pulpit, if abana, a place like an altar, a pulpit. Nyakumbula, when I had a meeting with abazalwane, like in that passive aggressiveness, like, yeah, woman ume in our pulpit, the Holy Spirit says fanele usuke lapho bebengisuse emsamo wenkonzo yabo. Like those are all examples of Umsamo. It is a shrine, ungayibeka, it can be an altar, ingabekwa, but sometimes abantu abanama resources, they don't have a home, or home is so far, or home is so far removed, or home has fallen apart so much that you are asking someone ongatholi umsebenzi to go build before izinto zilunga. No, yourself qala. You're the first shrine. You're the first altar.
Yeah. So it is to put it in terms that we are familiar with, it's like a holy place.
It's a holy
Or is that stretching it too much?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an issue with the word holy, but I'm trying to move away from abantu thinking, Momushile Umsamo, then it's not holy anymore. The word holy limits for me in Lela abantu, they can interact with a thing. It's a thing that it's not infallible, unless it's death. Everything can be fixed. You can make mistakes, because when you say Umsamo is a holy place and people don't want to make mistakes, it means that they don't want to learn. Bafuna ubachele ezisangoma ukuthi you put a candle on the right or on the left. They don't leave it to amadlozi to come and explain ukuthi no Umsamo njengoba nubekile ngicela no move. They don't give it the grace. Holy, I want to say, doesn't give room for grace. So they don't think they have grace to make mistakes or to have bad feelings or to speak ill. Umsamo, then it becomes this place that limits their ubuntu, like their humanity. Yeah.
And
or their human experience.
Intimidating.
It's very it makes it very intimidating. Then they call you all the time, Gogo, my daughter didn't realize she's having her period. Umsamo, kumoshekile na. No. It's really more intention than your actions, and amadlozi understand more your intention than mhlawumbe uzoyenza a mistake, or you're going to be a skru and uyemsama besuthi you niggas need to do better. So people think fanele ukhulume isiZulu, so the word holy then limits all of those experiences, because amadlozi have to know ukuthi sekhona ama skru. And they have to know what y'all niggas need to do better.
Right.
And as long as the intentions are good, they must learn now about the language of intention, because not all of these barriers that we put around spirituality and then translate that onto Umsamo, all of this shaming, all of this demands for perfection.
So it historically, where did Umsamo, where was it placed? Because I'm imagining, in the villages there was a certain structure to how families, there were different houses, different homes or different structures with different people and different functions. Where would Umsamo be in those situations?
Okay, I'm going to give example as Umzulu. Amazulu, they put it endlini kandlunkulu if it's a polygamous marriage. Endlini kandlunkulu is where the whole clan comes. Bezophahla Umsamo. So it's maybe a rendezvous, la kuzobekwa, or sometimes it's the kitchen. So the kitchen that you all use, the structures were separated. So Toluguti, the kitchen has a fireplace right in the middle, or wherever they put it. That room becomes Umsamo, or a certain part of that room becomes Umsamo.
And what would be then? What defines that place? What is in that physical space? It
really can be anything. It can be candles. If nisebenza impepho, it can be the presence of impepho. But I found that a lot of families will talk to then bazobeka inyongo. Once you've done a ceremony, bazobeka inyongo. But then you find sometimes a few years later, madlos are like, this space is sigcwele inyongo, please remove le inyongo nizlahle or nizigubhele engadini and start over. Then you find ukuthi Umsamo is empty. There's no, that's why it's physical and also metaphysical. It's not always ukuthi you're going to see a thing, it's just ukwazi ukuthi laphayana Umsamo, and this is like higher, this is how we treat Umsamo, this is who speaks Umsamo. If kungena abantu ekishini, the metaphysical people abahleli lapho, you know, because you place them. It's really a place where you ususa the load from yourself as umsamo amadlozi ahleli kuwe and bayakwazi ukuthi bengahlelanga kuwe bahleli lapho or bahleli emalwandle, you know. So it's what was I saying? It's funny for each clan, and some people don't like having too much stuff Umsamo or an indicator because Umsamo also umuntu angangangele Umsamo. So can be only the family members should know good Umsamo ula. Then when you're done, we just keep his into, because as much as having it is risky, sometimes having it. So I mean, not having Umsamo is risky, but sometimes having Umsamo then tells umuntu ozoganga ukuthi this is where you go.
Does not having Umsamo in the home mean that you're not spiritually grounded as a family? Especially considering now, because our family structures, our geographic and physical structures of a family is very different from how it was back in the day.
You can be spiritually grounded in that, as I was saying, mhlawumbe mama or a Methodist, and we are altar and Konzweni. That family can be spiritually grounded, but then there's a lot that they are removed from. There's a lot of history that they are removed from. There's a lot of record keeping that they are removed from. There's a lot of communication that they are removed from, you know,
because it resides in a person now.
It resides in a person now, and manje our elders are bayasibulala because umeshona they die as an institution, and there's nothing, you know, that you can know unless mhlambe uyisangoma, you know, and even uthwasa, you know, there are things that amadlozi wakho will only reveal to you afterwards. And I found that those things are very bloodline specific, you know, like these are our secrets. Kahle kahle thina we heal abantwana, and this is where you find the herbs, this is where you find the water, you know, then kuzophakama amanye amadlozi. So uthwasa is not even the end of that journey, you know. Your bloodline will further say, in my experience, I've had someone who said this is from 7 generations ago, and he came through and he was aggressive all the time. He was aggressive, he was angry, and then his mother came, which is what made me aware, okay, mhlambe kuzodingeka umsamo. His mother came and said, we were from royalty, Bengundlunkulu, but I had him 7 years after having his sister. So I struggled, like my fertility was not like that of other women at that point. And when he was born, I spoiled him to a fault. And then he became umuntu bebulala, lana, you know, I had to have him killed, and I had to bury him in an unmarked grave away from the royal grounds, you know. So then it's like, okay, if these people are going to keep coming with their problems, it's Umsamo, so that they can also come with the good. You know, they can also give me history of the good, because no one in my family could recognize the names. No one in my family could recognize that history. No one who is living could recognize the history. The people who could were the people who said, no, siyakhonza, but they knew it's the family of Izangoma. You know, so all of that knowledge that I see my children having, now that I'm Isangoma who's practicing, who has amatwasa, you know, sometimes has amatwasa, all of that knowledge, I'm imagining my children one day saying to their grandkids, hi, if I don't know that thing. They are going to die as institutions that hold that knowledge.
So the physical representation of it is a kind of family library.
It's a kind of family library.
Because if it's a physical presence, then it can lead, especially children, to ask questions.
Yeah, like, how was I born? Like, no, when Umsamo, you know, when your mother wasn't able to conceive, we went to Umsamo, and these are the rituals we performed. You know, for Gutumamako, or the ceremonies we performed for that, so that your mother agwas ufike wena. Then you know, oh, okay, this is the history of my birth. Like the knowledge Umsamo can go back to simple things like that. Your child knowing,
Yeah.
you know, this is what we had to do for you to be conceived with. Oh, okay. So then there are greater forces involved rather than just sexual intercourse for me to be born. There are other people who were concerned with me being born or consented to me being born. The power didn't just reside in my mother's uterus and my father's seed, you know, then wakula, and this is what we did, Umsamo, you know. So all of that can start there, you know, because sometimes a lot of the elders who knew really have passed away, or some of them bayazi, and they don't want to say.
So, in saying that, because what sometimes happens that people will be told that, you know, what does it usually mean, if there is a usually? Like, what are the typical things that could be wrong with Umsamo?
It can be that hawuko or anisaunagi, because people think Umsamo is like a thing you do once off and then you live. No, it's a breathing thing. Just like you see a structure that has integrity and it's strong, but when people are not living in that structure, suddenly it falls. You know, you think because it's brick and mortar or it's mud and grass, it doesn't live off of you and your energies. You know, so you think Umsamo is going to be just there and only when you need something. But sometimes your intentions, your energies, your efforts keep it alive. So there's nothing really outward, like ngathini ukuthi kuye kwamosha or someone slaughtered with a bad intention, or sometimes nothing as extreme as that, but something as a continuous neglect of that space. You know, a continuous neglect and disregard for that space can make Umsamo, like the people who reside Umsamo or rest Umsamo or come Umsamo when they're coming to you, bakatali. And then they find that, okay, now they are displaced.
I said that I have never heard of this word right up until very recent in my life. And a big reason for this is that I have never in my entire life growing up went into anyone's house, anyone's home, my friends, my relatives, anyone, and be told that this is Umsamo, this is our family. Here. You know what I mean? Like, I've never even, the idea that you didn't go into your parents' bedroom willy-nilly. Well, you did, but you know, you there was some kind of reverence. So now I'm trying to figure out, what does this mean for us in general as a people, that we don't have whether physical or metaphysical structures in our family where a person goes physically to connect.
You know, yeah, it's a type of displacement that I see a lot in people who grew up in urban areas, especially like Soweto, Tokuti 4-room, really agna structure, or there's not even space. Like, apartheid was such a brilliant thing. You know, in its purpose. It wasn't brilliant in that it was good, but it's brilliant in that it achieved its purpose with a lot of things. If ufagabantu kwi 4-room and the yard is small, they can't have a space that is just extra for Umsamo, you know. Though abanye abantu, like your parents' bedroom or the elder's bedroom, your mom's bedroom sometimes, if it's a single parent childhood home, then that is a corner in that space can be Umsamo, you know, where you go with a goat or a chicken, nikhulume corner, even if you slaughter it outside, nikhuluma corner, and then you slaughter. You know, some people don't have it. It's a type of displacement that has ended up catching up a lot with us. Like the 4th generation in that bloodline, they don't get married, they don't have children, you know, or it's a lot of displacement, man. Like, what's it? Drugs. There's just a type of stress that they end up having. Because imagine what it does for your spirit to be able to say, my heart is heavy. To have a place where you can say, my heart is heavy, and that place is not a human being. You know, so it's a type of displacement that leads to a lot of bad things and removes abantu so much that they think, okay, in order to have riches, kufanele ngithwale. That's just a symptom of how bad colonialism has affected abantu. How much it's displaced them. And that speaks to the land issue, like why people need land, why black people need land, why they need land in certain areas, because you can't just put people in land where there are no rivers, there's no water, there's no, vegetation, or the soil is not even alive,
What does it... There's a way in which we have come to engage with spirituality. There's a transactional way that we engage with spirituality, and I feel like thinking about Umsamo, and when you say a place where you can go just to say your heart is heavy, it's almost like I'm imagining a person going and saying my heart is heavy, and that's that. You're not saying anything, you're just sitting there and just saying
my heart is
heavy. And
because the transactional. I wish everyone who's been in Dumbeni uzotwasa, could understand it in that way. Twas so that your life is fine. You hope that your life gets better, or whatever afflictions get lifted, and they get healed. But we do approach spirituality as a transactional, thing. If I slaughter a cow, I must find a wife.
It's an ATM.
Yeah, it's an ATM, and like there's just so much harm. Do you think the ancients they don't? They don't. They don't need that. In order, they need you and your intentions to be pure, and for you to be receptive. It's not transactional. And though I'm not judging people who think it's transactional. If you live in a capitalist world, everything that you do should have a result, and to prove productivity, there has to be money involved. The transaction is, I find a partner, but what kind of partner? A partner who has money. I find a job, but what kind of job? Not a job where I can live and be at peace. Even if it's toxic, I just want my net salary to be 35,000 rands. And if that doesn't happen, you don't even recognize that you are more at peace. You're more connected to yourself. Your family is getting along better, because ulungse umsamo, or because utwasile, your children are healthy. But because that doesn't always translate to money, Toguti, you're the guardian of Umsamo. Because Umsamo needs intentions and cleaning and effort. So Toguti, you stuck emakaya, mhlambe somewhere in Limpopo, and the family does send you money, but you still have this thing and this like sense of self-esteem that's low because I can't find a job because and make money. You don't see how productive you're being to the bloodline, because productivity has to result in money. So that's why we think spirituality, it's a transactional thing. It's an ATM. Madlozi, you have to become an ATM.
I want to ask a very basic and probably almost stupid question. What do we come to spirituality for?
Let's first ask why we come to spirituality. Like, at which point do you come to spirituality? It's always at desperate points. You don't come as my daughter who's 9 and is always working in Dumbeni with me, or she's always keen, like she drums for Matwasa. She'll ask me, Yini lati. The child is provided for, the child is healthy, the child is happy relatively. She's a teenager now, so like hormones and mood swings and whatnot, but she's relatively happy. But she's interested in Yini ilati, Yini umsamo, why wenzi ilati? We don't ask at that point. We ask at a point where you've lost jobs, where your business plans just don't materialize, where you're not sleeping anymore, you're waking up at 3 a.m., where you're sick and doctors are saying clinically there's nothing wrong with you. You know, now I remember my medical files would always have psychosomatic illness. So it's like
you're convincing yourself.
You know? So you only go to spirituality then. You know, and it's okay because this spirituality has landed me with medical bills, psychosomatic illnesses, poverty, you know, then when I address it, it has to address all of these things. Because of the point at which we go to spirituality is so desperate, and desperation measured by how we don't fit in this capitalist world, like this highly driven by profit. If productivity has to have a profit, you know, and then 2 years later, you know what? The pain in my heart, ngapupha bathi leave your partner. Or ngapupha bathi, hi man, phuza amanzi. You know, just drink what sometimes
and mind your own business.
Mind your own business. Mind your own business. Like, you used to like reading, go back to reading. You know, you're not making more money, but there's a lot of sense and your brain gets rewired and, you know, you have all of those things. But maybe in the 3rd year, because you're now aligned in your purpose, you start making money.
So then in that context, then Umsamo speaks about spirituality being a way of life.
Yes, it's a way of life. It's a way of awareness. You know, like umuntu uzothi Gogo, I'd like to fix my life, but when you look at them, like the symptoms zabo sakuhlutshwa mandiki this person, you know, and umuntu ohlutshwa mandiki, it doesn't necessarily mean uzothwasa. You know, angimniki gobongo, then uzothola their purpose. Uthola ukuthi this person is an accountant, kanti they're supposed to come up with jingles for children, and that's how they're gonna make money. But Amanda, because they're interested in your personal gift, because the gift of Uthwasa is like baton being passed on to you. It's from someone else, and if you're lucky, you can trace the last person to be initiated as a healer. But otherwise, umdiki is, if your calling is to be a tavern owner, own a tavern, and you're going to make money from that. If it's to be a teacher, you're going to be a brilliant teacher, and you're going to make as much money as possible from that.
In that context.
You know? So it's mozo tukmuntu, okay, idli gobongo qala, phalaza qala, because self is umsamo. Mayithi umuntu, I'm not connected. Phalaza uzovula isifuba, because you drink beer, you drink cider, you drink gin all the time. And uzvala, you know, the faculties of communication, it's fuba nekhanda. Phalaza, it's like, what are you talking about?
Sure.
You know? Because kahle befanele ukuthi uthi, let's go slaughter in a river, a black what, then you'll get a snake and it's gonna
something
give
very
you
dramatic.
It has to be very dramatic. I mean, then people don't think you're really healing them. Like even umgcaba umuntu, they have to have markings and it has to be, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just a symptom of the wars that we've come from as abantu, you know. That's why izangoma had to be a certain way. Intelezi fanele lume for you to feel okay, I'm getting healed. Fanele umuthi, you must face east and do that and do that and do that for it to feel like it's working. Sometimes it's just tati joko uphalaze and your dreams are gonna open and amadlozi wakho are gonna tell you ukuthi, okay, asifuni impepho, use this.
So because back then there was a context for everything that was being done, and now there's a different context, right? So now I want to ask, I'm a person who lives in a flat on the 13th floor in Pretoria. Yeah. I grew up with, I don't know, my father. I grew up maybe with, let's say, my mother and my aunts and my grandmother, right? And then I come to you and you say to me, you know, kumele ngilungise umsamo wasekhaya. What will that physically entail? Because there is no Umsamo anywhere in my life, right? Whether where I live, where I grew up, you know, that what does that translate into physically?
it's so case specific, but I'm glad we're using someone like as an example. That person would have to go to Akezwe, Apalaza. I always run away from being the person who speaks on behalf of someone's ancestors. You're supposed to come to me when you've spoken with them and they've given you a symbol and you're like, "Ay, Gogo la ngiyahluleka." What does it mean? Zogeza, phalaze, sikhulume namadlozi, sihambe siye Umsamo, esidulini, sihambe siye entabeni. Depends ukuthi what they show me, kuthi asihambe sesidulini yokhuluma ukuthi bogogo angenazi, I don't know where to begin, I don't know where to start. Then they're like, there's an uncle of yours owakhile Umsamo, go and talk to him and maybe ningasebenzisa lo Umsamo until you buy a house of your own. So there's also like a separation in families and a mistrust among abantu. Then people don't say, mina nga as a man who has a home nga consult isangoma sathi aka a very small thing kuzoba Umsamo wakho. Then you dream or you by chance come across izinto and then they say, okay, this is the person who's going to help you, and they still remember the rules of Umsamo like
So then let's talk about.
Oh, sorry, but I want to add.
Yes.
Don't make isangoma your elder. Your family elders have a very important role to play. And sometimes you don't get information from elders, go to uzohlala and sit down and, like the session that we're having. Sometimes it's what people I used to see on Twitter or on Facebook, Utimina, I'm the lazy cousin. You don't get that service of getting bloodline information by being the lazy cousin. Kukamatri food, papa. Let the elders see you doing something, be involved in the community of your family, or whatever community, be involved. And then you can start asking our elders, hey, how do I solve it? Not by yo mina, magu funerally, at the cemetery, when I come back and I sit in the car. By not serving the community, I connect with your elders. It starts with your elders. And if your elders
your living elders.
Yeah, there is someone who knows. It can be that aunt who decided, instead of being a Christian, this thing, mhlambe abe afflicted with her own things, as Puzeluchwala, she may know a lot, but because when you have this sensibility to Zamapojwa, then you don't connect.
So now, how do we build Umsamo?
Akfani, like I'm running away from answering it. You know why? I'm running away because of abantu who want to Google everything. Like Google is a person. They want to Google Umsamo fan first qala ngawe. Then you'll start seeing or you'll start being guided. Ukuthi owagini Umsamo ulungiswa kanjani, because sometimes uthola ukuthi Umsamo udinga ukugezwa, ukhona but udinga ukugezwa. Sometimes Umsamo ukhona but udinga ukuthi nje uphakanyiswe, cleansing that space such that the ancestors who come and dwell in that space, nabo, they are cleansed. It doesn't have to be in you don't have to slaughter 20 cows for it. I've done Umsamo with 2 chickens. Togutia Pagama, and the family starts seeing a difference. And still, the difference is not always monetary. Sometimes it's the peace that we have. Oh, by the way, then we found an aunt, Ematatiela, and then the aunt was Chela Guti. By chance, the conversation led to indaba yomsamo or ukuthi ziyawa izindlu ngiphupe ukuthi kuwa izindlu kanti kahle kahle that aunt naye by your actions and intentions was bothered by amadlozi ukuthi this, go and tell this child. Ayifani misamo omunye uzothi we don't have a structure. I did struggle with the Ndebele family, a client, and they said we don't have phakathi. As a Mandebele, we have this house that's ending a thatch roof, but gahle we go outside. But abanye will say, okay, we do go inside, but it's not a standalone, that's all you do. It's our kitchen, and then you have to go isbayeni. Every family, kuna masigo, kunezithethe.
What's the difference?
Isiko is a region-specific rule of way of doing things, like rites and rituals. And then isithethe is kwaDlomo. This is what we do.
Okay.
KwaMtshali, this is what we do.
Okay.
KwaMahlangu, this is what we do. So isimo sakaMahlangu angeke sifane nesakaMtshali. And the reason for that is that with the situations that they come across in that clan, uthola ukuthi, let's make an example, indaba zokuya entabeni as a coming of age. Ukhona umkhulu who was skipped kwindaba zokuya entabeni. And then it becomes an affliction. It's a very specific kaMahlangu. And then they have to consult with amadlozi. How do we resolve this? Thathani litshe nilise entabeni, lelo litshe for every phase when abafana go lihambe nilakhela ibhoma nichisa ibhoma, but you speak with it at every turn. Then that issue is resolved. Do you understand? That might not apply kwaSibego where they don't do indaba yasentabeni.
I think you know what I worried about. I worry about people who very much want to correct their spiritual path. Not necessarily being told that there's something wrong, but I'm here now, it's 2021. I want to start doing this. No one said anything to me about anything being wrong, but I am a young woman. I have my own career. I have my own job. Maybe I'm left with my mother and have two little sisters, and now I'm trying to figure out what to do, because I think when I say I'm worried that people might be intimidated by the fact that there is no set thing, and it seemed like it seemed like a very involved process.
But that's a challenge, to be patient and to wait, because also spirituality, amadlozi take their own sweet time with some things, It's a challenge. You start with yourself, and sometimes just keeping your space clean. Hey, just washing your blankets. That can be a clean Umsamo. Ugeziwe, not even with umuthi, just coarse salt, praying over it. Ugezile, uphalazile ngejoko. You haven't seen isangoma, and then you'll have a dream of something. You talk to your mother, or you speak to your mother. That's another thing. Abantu bazophahla once a year. Uyaphahla. In that space, it can be a white candle with just a sniff, not impepo, And you have a dream, and then you don't understand that dream. Go back, Umsamo, or that space, that altar that you've now built. Go back to that altar and say, Gogo, I'm hearing and I'm seeing in this dream, nithe kanje 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 kanje. What does it mean? And how can I be best aligned? There was Idlozi. I don't even know Sizwe Samanjali, so in my bloodline, when I was transing, I don't even know how far, he goes. He has a very heavy speech impediment. And he was a lesson in transing, but being patient with the person who has come through. And he said, when you ask for things, you don't take into account that our understanding of time is not like your understanding of time. And that sometimes can even be, we were alive, or we lived and died at the time when we were moving from Central Africa and we were right at the equator. So when you say tomorrow, it may be a different understanding to me. It may be a different understanding, because along the equator, when you can say 6, the time that the sun will be a certain way, and it'll be that way throughout the year, But Nina, you're in a different part of the continent, even you're a different reality, and you see different things, and your anxieties are very different from ours. Like, we want to make things happen for you, but sometimes explain with Gogo, this is what I mean. Take them along with you to this world. Explain. So this is a challenge from what you're saying, from your question. Okay, what do you do? There are no elders. You live in a flat, but you want to have Umsamo. The challenge is understanding and uqala. It can be a candle, it can be a man's. A glass of water, a white candle, and a sniff. Where you light that, and they learn with, amadlozi also respond kakhulu with routine. If you go and you light that, they're like, that's an invitation. ukhuluma something. Okay, she didn't understand that dream. Okay, go back and explain the dream further. So it can take years, and there's nothing wrong with that. It can take years. Go. Now I understand the dreams, but okay, then they can say, okay, you've opened lines of communication. Go and see Sangoma, but go see so and so. Then you guide it, and that has nothing. Still, asikakhulumi ngokuthwasa. That has nothing to do with ukuthwasa. That action on its own is ukulungisa umsamo.
So I'm actually captured by when you say it starts with yourself and how you treat yourself, because I'm trying to imagine what treating myself as the primary umsamo actually translates into. It sort of then necessitates that there are things that I do not do.
To treat yourself as umsamo.
You know what I mean? So I'm sort of trying to figure that out.
If you're going to dull your senses or dull your pain with alcohol all the time, you're not addressing yourself as umsamo. You're silencing yourself. If you're going to try and sex away your afflictions, and I'm not saying guti like promiscuity, just you.
You're not saying hoe is not life.
Yeah, I mean, it can be life if that's your kind of thing. And so I'm running away from slut shaming and all those things. Look, if you're trying to sex away a certain type of pain, you're not honoring yourself as umsamo. You're silencing yourself. If you are trying to sometimes Google away your confusions or like listen to music, it starts with very little things. Like start by being aware of self. It's okay, when I'm stressed, I lashed out. But what are the 10 steps where you're like, I'm feeling, a tingle in my stomach. What does it mean? Oh, I'm stressed. But what triggered the stress? Hi, ngibone on the news. Uguti, they are looting. Or what? Or like, wow, will I find a job? Then also stressed. Then into next week, you only become aware when you lash out. It starts with this is how the feeling grows in me, and this is how it settles in me, and this is how it settles in my bones. Like there was a time I was grief stricken, and I said, I don't want to do anything. And it's not that I'm depressed, but I want to sleep all the time because this grief has settled in my bones, and I needed to do something, maybe pray, but praying with an understanding. I'm not praying it away. I'm bringing awareness to it. I'm bringing honor and attention into this thing. It's okay, but what is the solution?
Like you're literally facing it.
I'm facing it. So when you're not facing your own issues, when you're not when you keep saying, oh, my period is an inconvenience. Yes, it's an inconvenience, but you don't want to see it as an instrument, of measure, then you won't understand it. That tells you are an ecosystem in yourself. When you don't attend to that ecosystem, it doesn't help to have umsamo in a physical, ideal place. It doesn't help. You have to attend to this umsamo, and then it translates to umsamo in itself. Because amadlozi, mosa twasa, ngithu twasa, I had left my children. I was breastfeeding my son when I left him. And I was carrying all of those anxieties, and I also thought it's transactional. So twasa and everything will be fine. And Amadlozi it was the most confusing thing when Amadlozi kept saying, it's for basekotwana sivalekile. And Kobela being tethisa ukuthi no, you need to release your thoughts. And I didn't know how to do that. But it really involved, that's why utwasa and uhlala khona. And that's your time to unplug from the world so that you can sit with yourself and say, okay, this is what makes my heart heavy. How do I release it? Because there's no way I don't feel it at all. And one of them is staying with people who are not my family. One of them is staying with people who are family, but agabalalisi because he was being breastfed and his mother just had to leave him. So being aware, okay, what makes my chest heavy? That helped me a lot. And it was a basic knowledge of self and knowing your triggers and naming your triggers and processing without leaning on TV, leaning on alcohol, leaning on sex, leaning on friends. It was just you, yourself, and as a portal and a vessel yamadlozi, then it would make amadlozi come through easier and they'd have more messages and more feedback.
And then the physical structure of Umsamo will then come naturally from that point.
It can come naturally, but it can also come from your efforts. Okay, now you have to assign a healer. But what I always ask is, who's the eldest? Do they not know ukuthi umsamo wakini wenziwa kanjani? Then I come and then I intervene in that way. Like I found that as izangoma now, we're having to do a lot of work that has nothing to do with the bungoma. Umsamo shouldn't have to do with isangoma. Isangoma singabheka ukuthi umsamo uma kahle kukhona umkhulu okhalayo, and there should be an elder who knows ukuthi how do you address that.
Because you can't come with the family history.
I don't come with the family history. I just have to open myself up to receive. And I appreciate the opportunity, I don't want to lie, because then it gives me an opportunity to learn how other bloodlines do it and how they manifest their afflictions, especially as umuntu like who sometimes has amatwasa coming through, but it shouldn't have to be isangoma the first port of call for umsamo. It shouldn't be. It should be for extreme things like ukhona umuntu watwala gogo and then he died and there are no instructions on how to do this thing yakhe yokutwala. How do we get rid of it? Then isangoma can be involved from there. But not for basic communication.
How do couples navigate the issue of Umsamo? Because we are not necessarily getting married, these days. We are living together for a long 15 years, 10 years,
Hey, you woke.
So how because up to so far we've spoken about family and we've spoken about the individual, but now I have a partner that I live with, he or she, let's assume, on a very positive note that the partner is familiar and is willing, they're not opposed to these things. How do couples then approach the issue of Umsamo when they live together and possibly even they have kids even
without getting married?
Yazi,
there are things that we can't run away from as a band, especially black people. So amadlozi recognize certain things as a seal or a communication. Because okay, I'm with this person, okay, nyajola, all right, fine. But now gukona, and I'm sure there are lots of blessings that people can see, by being together and having children with each other, because the introduction of abantwana through the mixing of bloodlines can undo some bloodline curses. It can also bring forth some blessings that maybe gadloma awekho but galon kamathebula akhona. That mixing of the bloodlines it can help. But kube khona into ukuthi when you're married, when your partnership is not recognized by amadlozi as an institution, there can be a problem.
Do abantu abadala, do they recognize umjolo?
They recognize umjolo very much. No, they recognize umjolo, and they recognize umjolo because there were very, very many of romantic relationships of mine where they've ended it. They've said, not this person.
Does it necessarily mean that for them every relationship should be a long-term permanent one?
No, it doesn't have to be. Okay. Sometimes utoluguti, you are just a site of healing, maybe through sexual exchange. Not tuguti, it's a ritual like izangoma where they say I have to sleep with you to heal you. No, a site of healing for that time, an interaction between amadlozi wenu for that time. Maybe there's information. I found that in everyday conversations there's a lot of guidance. So maybe I interact with the person and amadlozi wami needed to pass the message on through that person, and sometimes I needed to learn that a certain lesson through my interactions with that person. And sometimes natige we confuse those friendships. We think everything is validated by being a romantic relationship. Like it can't just be a friendship, So you told Uguti, those are meant to be short term. It's fine. But then Amadlozi, I remember like it was 2 years ago where my grandfather's mother came and said, "Aniwenzu memulo," and this is utwase isndao, but the basic ndao ritual of a coming of age, that's a ndao ritual. It balances the same areas and influences the same areas in your life as utwasa umdao is, like sex, money, finance, companionship, So aniyenzu memulo. You don't ask the cosmos, because Umemula is not just about the ancestors walapo. Also, the ancestors are reporting to certain forces, God, if you may, So Anienzi, the rituals and offerings, and supplications to those forces. So Amanda Wenu are inherently imbalanced because of that. Kufanele ubatshele in your family ukuthi nenza umemule. And in that dream I asked ukuthi, but Basindisiwe, what do I do? And she was like, look, as long ubatshelile mina, I need you to make the effort of telling them. And then a year later, I had discussed this and then everyone was like, I mean, I'm already married. Or no, mina, anglandeli, or, and then some dragged their feet. And then the elders then said, "Asakumbuli, it has been so long, and we don't want to do the work when we've skipped so many generations because we have to start with all of them. And how many cows is that?" Then Amatlozi, I met someone, and the relationship just ended. I mean, I thought, as in, I'm a talking stage, I appeal. It happens.
You get ghosted.
No, I didn't even get ghosted. It was like such dizzy reasons. I don't even remember his reasons because I must text him and ask him, what were your reasons? But then get into a talking stage. But then I dreamt of the person who had broken up with me, and kept dreaming of him, dreaming of rituals. And I was like, I don't recognize these rituals. And then later, he dreams of a totem that is very specific to me, as a sangoma, like an albino python. Very specific. And he dreams that it had swallowed a baby girl. And in the dream, we were not in touch, but in the dream, he was dialing my number so he can tell me that he found it, but it has swallowed a baby girl, and that detail is confusing him. It jolted him into making contact. It's like, okay, they made contact. And it's like, now I've been dreaming of you. These are the dreams. And it was like, but these are Ndebele rituals. These are Ndebele rituals. Like, oh, okay, fine. Then we keep talking, then we keep having these dreams, where his ancestors are like, you must be with this person. And my ancestors are like, you must be with this person. And we didn't understand the reasons, because we'd moved on to other people. Then when we met up again, I realized, and he realized, that actually there's a service in his bloodline where they've neglected and abandoned Ubungom. But I've done that in my bloodline, and my ancestors are benefiting from that and have that strength again, And in his bloodline, they've kept the coming of age rituals intact through the generations. So that's like on the surface, a direct act of service and balancing of strengths and weaknesses that Amadlozi wanted to do. But they were very insistent on that happening only in marriage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you let's say, going back to the issue of living together, do you then if in the formation of the physical structure of it, do you use the same place? Since there's no union, there's no official union.
No, you don't use the same place because it's different ancestors that have not been combined. Awahlanganiswanga, and inyongo as a seal and something that fortifies has not been used. So amadlozwenu are separate, although they can work together in certain ways, And I want to say, Guti, you can understand the world a certain way, but amadlozi are seeing it in a different way, So there are sensibilities of why are you staying with umntana abantu ungamlobolanga, ungayenzanga all the rituals, therefore we'll do this. I'm not saying that it can happen with every couple, but amadlozi can come with their own sensibilities and impose them and say, we can't release certain things or certain blessings or certain lessons into this union because it hasn't been fortified and we haven't been officially invited. Uthola ukuthi abantwana bayabangwa ukuthi my ancestors as the female are claiming the kids as their own because vele abantwana come from the maternal, and they don't know how to invite the paternal or ukusebenzisana with the paternal for that child. So uthola ukuthi ayisindi nina as a couple, and mhlambe in your wokeness you're like, we don't do ilobola, we don't feel like our union should be solidified by
Western
what. Kanti all of those rituals have their own significance, and sometimes you can't run away from them. So ukuthi ukufika kwabantu nje badle bacule, that adds intentions onto that union.
It doesn't have to include inyongo.
It doesn't have. That has to include inyongo. We find I've come across too many cases to try and remix indaba inyongo. I've come across cases where amadlozi don't recognize that marriage. Everything was done kwalotsholo atshela amadlozi, but umuntu zange amthele ngenyongo or inyongo iye yasetshenzwa ingayimosha the whole union. So there are things we can't run away from.
Thokozani.
Thank you.
Umsamo is really not a universal concept that all cultures adhere to. In some Xhosa tribes, the kraal where the cows live is treated as a sacred space where the ancestors reside, and many rituals are conducted from there. In fact, for many other cultures, Umsamo is not contained within the structure of the home itself, but outside, under sacred trees. Some are in mountains, some are by rivers. And as Ugogo said, the instruments, the tools that are used also differ across the cultures, the tribes, and even across individual families themselves. The point that I'm making is that please don't get caught up in the exactness of it. We are facing the raw reality that many of us come from families where there isn't a single living elder who knows what form our particular Umsamo must take. And our social media culture is also such that we are obsessed with comparing our understandings and perceptions of spirituality. We feel safer doing what everyone else is doing, and we take information from one source and take it to another person to seek validation for ourselves, or we invalidate another person's understanding and interpretation. Please don't. Please don't do that to yourself. Please don't do that to another person. And most importantly, please don't do that to your ancestors. What is extremely important to remember is that the concept of Umsamo has evolved over thousands and thousands of years, and it has never been just one thing for every single group of people at any point. What is also crucial to keep in mind is that we are at a point where we ourselves are compelled to redefine it for us and our generation, and possibly those who are going to come after us. At its very core, Umsamo is about legacy. It is like a spiritual inheritance. Right now, we are living through a storm, yet, regardless of the damage that this storm inflicts on us, the question still remains as to what will our descendants inherit from us. We will certainly not leave them with some kind of spiritual euphoria, some kind of warm, fuzzy feeling about spirituality. But at the very least, we can leave them the truth about what we did, or what we didn't do, or what we let happen, or what we didn't make happen. So much of our engagement with spirituality is shaped around the idea of ancestors being angry, but I suspect that those who will come after us will be forced to deal with ancestors who are hurt. Like, can you imagine generation after generation having to deal with ancestors who have anxiety, idlozi, eline depression? I almost want to laugh, and it would be funny if it didn't mean that another 100 years of black people swimming in darkness and despair. Taking from what Ugogo said about you being the primary space or the primary site of Umsamo, I would like to ask you, what does it mean for you to be Umsamo? You as a person. What does it mean for you to be the site of a sacred space? And before we DM abogogo nabomkhulu asking them what we should do or shouldn't do Umsamo, what does you being the physical embodiment of a metaphysical Umsamo translate into? If you were to have Umsamo in your home and you would say that these are the do's and don'ts of that particular space, then what are the do's and don'ts of you being that space? Because whatever it is that you build in your home, you are then the personification of that philosophy when you leave your home. What you say and do in that space is what you carry with you when you leave your home. I think only you can answer that. What I can tell you from my own experience is that once you decide to prioritize your spiritual journey, and most especially your spiritual self, the formation of Umsamo is something that then comes naturally to you. You will know what feels right and what feels wrong as you grow deeper in your understanding and in your connection with your guides. For me, Umsamo is where I go to face my challenges. It is where I go to allow myself to fall apart. But it is also where I go to gain my strength. It is like my corner of the boxing ring. It doesn't save me from my battles, but it is where I get my guidance and my encouragement from, and that is what I walk out the door with. My name is Vosomzi Nqande. Thank you for joining me on yet another episode of the Journey Kwantu. I really hope that the series is helpful and it answers as many of your questions as possible. I appreciate the comments and I appreciate the questions that are posted. I may not always respond, but I do read every single one of them, and I do try my best to incorporate your questions in every episode. And with that, I wish you light, I wish you courage, and I wish you all the best on your journey. Makwande.